Her coffee mug was still on the counter. That was the first thing I noticed when I walked in. Not the bare shelves, not the rolled-up rugs stacked by the door, not the stripped wall where her gallery of mismatched frames used to hang. Just the mug, white with a small chip on the rim that she always said she'd replace. And never did. It was sitting there, like it had been waiting for someone to pick it up. Except Kieran hadn't been there in 3 weeks. I'd driven 40 minutes with a box of her things in the back seat, rehearsing what I was going to say the whole way. I had it planned out in my head, hand over the box, say something civil, leave. Maybe 2 minutes. I wasn't looking for a conversation. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted to put it behind me and stop having a cardboard box full of her stuff sitting next to my laundry basket, like a problem I kept deferring. I found the address through a text she'd sent me months ago, a pin drop when she moved in, before things got complicated. I almost didn't use it. I thought about just leaving the box on the porch. But I wanted to do it right. I don't know why. She hadn't done anything right by me. I guess I was still trying to be the person I thought I was. The door opened before I even knocked. A woman stood there in a paint-stained Henley and jeans, a dish towel over one shoulder. She looked at the box, then at me, then at the box again. "You're Elliot," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. "Is Kieran home?" She looked at me for a second, like she was deciding something. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. "She's not. Come in." I almost said no. I had the box. I had my keys in my hand. I was parked 2 feet from the curb. But something about the way she said it made me step inside before I'd made a conscious decision to. The apartment smelled like turpentine and fresh coffee. The living room had that stripped-down look that comes when someone leaves in a hurry, not moved out, just vacated. The bookshelf had gaps in it. One side of the couch had an indent where a throw pillow used to be. I recognized a few things and noticed the absence of more. "I'm Cecile," the woman said, moving toward the kitchen. "I'll make you a fresh cup." "I'm fine," I said. "It's cold outside and you're holding a box. Sit down." I sat down. She poured 2 cups without asking again and set one on the coffee table in front of me. Then she sat across in an armchair and looked at me like she was trying to figure out where to start. "When did she leave?" I asked. 18 days ago. She said it the way you say a number you've been counting. She told me she was visiting her sister in Portland for a long weekend. She didn't come back. Did she say? "She texted me," Cecile said. "She said she needed space and she'd explain later." That was day 4. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Haven't heard from her since. I didn't say anything. I was looking at the mug she'd given me. I turned it in my hands. "She used to talk about you," Cecile said. "Good things? Mostly." She tilted her head. "Some frustration. She said you were the kind of person who made her feel like she had to be better than she was. That's not." I stopped. "I never asked her to be anything." "I know," Cecile said. "She said that too." That was the frustrating part, I think, for her. I didn't know what to do with that. I set the mug down. "I brought her stuff," I said, gesturing at the box. I wasn't sure if she'd want me to mail it or, "I can take it," Cecile said. "If she ever resurfaces." There was a flatness in her voice when she said that. Not mean. Just tired. "How are you handling it?" I asked. I wasn't sure why I asked. It came out before I thought about whether it was my business. She looked at me for a second. "I'm her roommate." Was her roommate? She set her own mug down. "I'm also on the lease. That landed differently than I expected." "How much time is left?" I asked. 7 months. I did the math involuntarily the way you do. At her half of the rent, which I'd heard mentioned once in passing, around $1,400, that was nearly $10,000 sitting between Cecile and the end of the lease, with nobody splitting it. "Have you talked to your landlord?" I asked. "Yesterday," she said. "He was." She paused. "He was understanding. In the way that means he's not going to do anything about it, but he wanted me to know he wasn't happy either." "Can you find a subletter?" "I've posted it twice. The unit above has a dog that barks from 6 to 9 every morning. I've gotten 3 inquiries and 0 callbacks. What are you going to do?" She looked out the window. It had started raining sometime while I was inside, soft and steady, the kind that makes the street sound like static. "I have no idea," she said. "I keep hoping she'll call." I should have left. I'd dropped the box, I had my keys, but I looked at Cecile and she looked at me and neither of us moved. "Tell me what you know," I said. "About the lease. What you've got in writing. Why?" "Because I spent 2 years watching her manage situations by leaving them for other people to handle, and I'm annoyed, and I have nothing else to do tonight." That surprised her. She almost smiled. She got up and came back with a folder, the lease, a couple of printed email threads, a screenshot of a Venmo transaction from last month where Kieran had sent her half the rent, but the month before that was missing. We spread it on the coffee table. The lease had a standard roommate clause, both tenants jointly liable, no unilateral subletting without landlord approval, 30 days written notice required for any changes. Kieran hadn't given 30 days. She'd given 0 days. The question was whether Cecile could force a formal separation of liability, which was going to depend on how cooperative the landlord felt like being, and whether Kieran could be reached at all. "Do you have her parents' contact?" I asked. "I have her mom's email from when we first signed," she said. "I've never used it. You might need to." She looked at the email address in her contacts like it was a door she hadn't decided to open. "She'd hate that," Cecile said. "She's not here." She looked at me. Something shifted in her expression, not quite a laugh, but the shape of one. "You're right," she said. "She's not." We worked through it slowly. I found a tenant rights resource from the State Housing Authority. She was in Colorado, and Colorado had a few specific provisions that worked in her favor. The landlord couldn't unilaterally increase her share of the rent, couldn't evict her for the other tenant's absence if she continued paying her half, and had no obligation to fill the vacancy on an emergency timeline. What he could do, what Cecile could push him to do, was formally release Kieran from the lease if Kieran could be reached and signed off. That was the sticking point. "So the whole thing hinges on whether she responds," Cecile said. "Basically." She stared at the papers. "She'll respond to you before she responds to me," Cecile said. "You know that, right? I'm not going to pressure her. I'm not asking you to pressure her. I'm asking you to try." I looked at her. She was asking something reasonable. She was asking it quietly, without drama, and she looked like she'd been sitting with this alone for 18 days before a stranger showed up on her doorstep with a cardboard box. "I'll text her," I said. "I'll tell her she needs to handle this." "That's all." "That's enough," she said. I opened my phone. I stared at Kieran's name in my contacts for a few seconds. Then I typed, "Hey, I'm at your old apartment. Cecile told me what happened. You need to deal with the lease situation. It's not fair to leave her holding this." I looked at it, deleted the last sentence, typed it back, then sent it before I could second-guess it anymore. We both looked at the phone. Nothing. "It might take a while," I said. "Yeah," Cecile said. She started gathering the papers back into the folder. "Thank you. Seriously, you didn't have to do any of this." "She put your mug on the counter and left," I said. "That bothered me." Cecile looked at me. "The white one with the chip," I said. "On the counter. When I walked in, I don't know. It bothered me." "That's mine," Cecile said quietly. "She borrowed it months ago." I stopped asking for it back. Something about that sat heavy between us. "You want coffee?" she said. Real question this time. "Yeah," I said. "I do." She poured it into a different mug, a blue one, solid and thick-walled, and handed it to me. We sat back down and neither of us picked up the folder again. "How long were you two together?" she asked. 2.5 years? Were you serious?" "I was," I said. "I thought she was." She nodded like that confirmed something. "She told me about a weekend you two took up to Estes Park," she said. She talked about it a lot, actually. Said it was the best trip she'd ever taken. I remembered it. A rented cabin, a broken heater, a gas station dinner that somehow became the best meal of the trip. I'd been planning to propose. I'd had the ring for 6 weeks before that trip and chickened out twice, and then we had a stupid argument about directions, and I ended up not doing it, and then 3 months later she told me she needed to reevaluate things. I never told her about the ring. "It was a good weekend," I said. "She was in a strange place," Cecile offered. "The last few months I knew her. Not sad, exactly. More like disconnected. Like she was going through the motions of a life she was thinking about leaving." "She did leave," I said. "She left everyone," Cecile said. "Not just you." That was the first time it had occurred to me to think of it that way. I'd been sitting with this idea that I was specifically the problem, that I'd been found wanting, tested, and failed some invisible standard, and maybe I had. But sitting in this apartment with Cecile, looking at the empty spaces on the shelves, I started to think that maybe Kieran had been compiling her exits for longer than I knew. We talked for a while. I don't know how long. The rain picked up and then eased off, and I looked at my phone once, and it was past 9. I'd gotten there at 6:30. Kieran hadn't replied. I should probably go, I said. Probably, Cecile agreed. But neither of us moved. Tell me something, I said. And tell me the truth. Was she happy? With me in the beginning? Cecile looked at me carefully. I think so, she said. She talked about you the way people talk about things they're afraid to lose. That's not nothing. But I also think she was afraid of what it meant, to actually be happy, to actually stay. I thought about that ring in my coat pocket, the trip to Estes Park, the argument about directions. She never said any of that to me, I said. She didn't say it to me either, Cecile said. Not directly. You just pick up on things when you live with someone. I stood up finally, picked up my keys, looked around the apartment one more time, the borrowed mug on the counter, the gap in the bookshelf, the rolled up rugs. If she signs the lease release, I said, you should be okay. But get the landlord to put everything in writing, even a text chain. Don't do it over the phone, I will. She stood up too. Elliot. I turned around. Thank you, she said. Not for the lease stuff. Just thank you. She put your mug on the counter and left, I said again. Cecile looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name, and then she almost laughed and it turned into a real one. Small, tired, genuine. Yeah, she said. She did. I drove home in the rain. The box was gone from the back seat. The coffee sat warm in my stomach. I thought about Estes Park and the ring I never showed her, and the way Cecile laughed and the mug with the chip in the rim, and I thought about how strange it was that the thing Kieran left behind, the person she left behind, along with her half of the lease and her half of the furniture and her borrowed mug on the kitchen counter, turned out to be someone worth knowing. 2 weeks later, Kieran texted me back. I'm sorry, she wrote. I know I made a mess of things. I'll sign whatever Cecile needs. Please tell her I'm sorry too. I forwarded it to Cecile. She replied with a single line, Okay, I'll reach out then. After a pause, you want to get coffee sometime? Non-emergency. No folders. I stared at my phone for a second. Then I wrote back, Yeah, I'd like that. We met at a place near her apartment on a Thursday morning. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, with a book face down on the table and a coffee in the blue mug she'd brought from home, the kind of person who carries their own mug to a coffee shop without being self-conscious about it. I sat down across from her. You brought your mug, I said. The cups here are too small, she said. You just have to order two. It was the most ordinary thing. I don't know why it stuck with me. We talked for almost 2 hours. Not about Kieran, not about the lease, not about any of it. About her job, which turned out to be painting murals for commercial spaces. About mine, which was structural engineering and bored me in ways I'd been pretending not to notice. About the Estes Park trip, eventually, but from a distance, the way you can talk about something once enough time has passed. She told me about the mural she was finishing downtown, a long, horizontal piece for the lobby of a medical building, abstract, blues, and greens. She'd been working on it for 3 weeks. She said she'd almost painted over the whole thing twice because she couldn't make it look the way she heard it in her head. That's not how art works, is it? I said. Hearing it. That's exactly how it works, she said. If you can't hear it, you can't see it. I thought about the ring, the way I'd carried it for 6 weeks and couldn't find the moment. Maybe I couldn't hear it. Maybe that had been the problem all along. The coffee shop was starting to fill up around 11. We both noticed and neither of us mentioned it. The book she'd set face down was a collection of Marilyn Robinson essays. I could see the spine now, and she had a habit of sliding her thumb along the edge of her mug when she was thinking, just back and forth. I noticed that, and then I noticed I'd noticed it. I should let you get back to the mural, I said. I'm not going in until noon, she said. I've been sitting here longer than I usually sit anywhere. Is that unusual for you? She considered it. Yes. We paid separately. Outside, the city was doing its Thursday morning thing, delivery trucks, joggers, a guy walking a very serious-looking Labrador who seemed to have an agenda. Which way are you? She asked. East, I said. I'm west, she said. She held the blue mug with both hands even though it was empty now, just a habit. Elliot. Yeah, I know this is strange, given how we met and everything, but I wanted to say, I'm glad you didn't just leave the box on the porch. I thought about the 40-minute drive, the rehearsed speech, the box of belongings I'd been deferring for 3 weeks. Me too, I said. She turned and walked west. I stood there for a second and watched her go, mug in both hands, Henley under a jacket now, not looking back, and I thought, I still have that ring. I'd never done anything with it. It was sitting in the back of my sock drawer where I'd put it 6 months ago when I stopped lying to myself about timing. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But for the first time in a long time, I thought about the future in a way that didn't feel like closing something down. I walked east. The sun was out now, pale and thin but there. Somewhere downtown, a mural that looked like the inside of something quiet was waiting to be finished. And I thought, some things you don't plan. Some things you don't find. Some things just open a door and tell you to come in out of the rain.